this has gone through a few iterations of the bill, and it's gone through the General Assembly before. Why stick with it? Why have your support?
You know, this is something that I have believed strongly in for a long time. This began for me probably 15 years ago, long before I was ever involved in politics or government, but I was involved in education issues. I was actually involved in an inner city at-risk youth program, and I was dealing with kids that had really challenging situations in their lives, and they were in some of the lowest performing schools that we had in the system. And I worked with those kids, and I found that if they had some alternatives or some options, then their trajectories changed. And that's when I started thinking, you know what, we ought to give every kid every chance we can to find the right fit for their school. That's what the basis of education reform and education freedom is about. It's become an increasingly popular idea. Most Tennesseans think we should do this. The polling is showing that. State after state is doing this now. There have been 30 states or so have some form of school choice. 10, and probably this year, 11 and 12 of them will have what we're proposing, which is universal school choice. This is something that President Trump feels very strongly about, the Republican Party. It's not just a partisan issue, however. The majority of Democrats in our state believe that this should happen, so we need to get it done.
What do you hope is the future of education in Tennessee, assuming that this bill is a part of it?
I think what we need to hope for is that children in our state have access to every opportunity they can to succeed. That includes education. And for the vast majority of our children, they're going to be in our public school system. That's why we have to be committed to our public schools first and foremost. We've put billions of dollars, record numbers of dollars into our public schools since I came into office. We've raised teacher pay from a very low level to a level that will, in the next couple years, be a top 10 state in the country for teacher pay. This proposal for education freedom includes facilities funding for our public schools. So first and foremost, we gotta support public schools. They're going to be the sort of bedrock of the system. But we also have to be innovative and have options and give parents choices who believe that what's best for their child might not be that public school. They may have another option. When we give parents, who are the ones who know best what their child needs, when we give them an option, the outcomes are going to be better. And when the outcomes are better, it elevates the entire system. It's interesting, Florida has had school choice for many years, 10, 11, 12. They're one of the first states in the country to implement it, and they've had universal school choice as well. And by the way, they have the third best public school outcomes in America. Ours are in the 30s in our state. That's what I want for Tennessee, is our children, our public schools, our private schools, our future is bright because of the opportunities that our children have in education. So we know this, that data shows that's what happens. We just need to get it done.
You mentioned that public school building funding that's included in this bill. Part of that is taken out of the lottery fund. Some are in fear that this may have an impact on the Hope Scholarship. Mm-hmm. Can you speak on that and if it will have an impact?
I think that there's a commitment to the Hope Scholarship, and there are actually some discussions about an amendment that will make a fix to make sure that if it became a threat to the dollars that are attached to Hope Scholarship, then we can clearly change that. We fully will fund the Hope Scholarships. We cannot afford for those to be changed. In fact, it's really interesting when you think about Hope Scholarship and how popular that's been for our state. we are using taxpayer dollars to provide scholarships for students to go to public and private universities. This Education Freedom Scholarship Act is an extension of, in part, the Hope Scholarship Fund just for K through 12. We have long used dollars from our state's budget to fund scholarships, both for public and private higher ed. We should be doing that for K through 12 as well.
All right, now we'll move on to Helene relief. So there's a total of $450 million that's slated to be distributed through different areas through Helene relief. More than $200 million is expected to help local governments. Of all the ways that support could be provided, why was this one selected?
Well, I think the first thing we've got to do is address the infrastructure needs for the communities that are most affected. We met with county mayors, we met with local leaders, and we understood. In fact, I was walking down the street with one of the county mayors who said, we're going to get federal reimbursement, but the short term, we can't pay the difference between that we have to wait while we wait for this federal funding. That created the HEAL program, which was done a couple months ago, and we could do that without legislation. But what we found in that was there is a much larger need for dollars, for interim dollars, for interest on dollars that counties have to borrow to make some of their payments. There is a much greater need to reduce the share that counties have to put in to get and draw down that federal funding. There's just a lot more that needs to be done. This is an unprecedented disaster. It's 12 times the size financially of any disaster we've had in our state. This requires unusual action. And so we have created a number of funds that are going to be used for different purposes based on the feedback that we got from local leaders. And I will say this too, I flew to North Carolina to meet with President Trump on Friday, specifically to advocate for our counties in Tennessee with him as it relates to the changes that will come in FEMA, potentially with the new administration. You know, I expressed passionately why we need dollars from the federal government to address these unprecedented disasters. And I think we will see additional federal relief coming our way in the months and years ahead. But this is unprecedented disaster, which takes unprecedented action, and that's why we're doing this in a special session.
Last thing I've got is Hampton High School. We had you speak on it in Asheville, but I wasn't there. I want to hear about it. What kind of funding is expected, and what do you hope that brings to the Hampton community?
Yeah, so I walked the day after, 2 days out. I went up to Upper East many times over the weeks following the disaster, and walking past that school and through that school grounds, it was heartbreaking to see the center of a community, as a high school oftentimes is, so destroyed. So we looked at what federal funding will likely come. We are putting in this legislation $20 million to cover what we believe will be needed to finalize those expenses. We'll see what the needs are eventually, but we think that what we have done will make sure that Hampton High gets rebuilt.